Daniel Reed was untouchable. At 42 years old, he stood at the peak of everything a man could dream of achieving. His name alone commanded silence in boardrooms across the country. Real estate empires bowed to his vision. When he spoke, investors listened. When he moved, markets shifted. He owned luxury penthouses in 3 cities, drove cars most people only saw in magazines, and lived in a mansion so breathtaking it had been featured in architectural journals around the world. His home was a masterpiece. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they seemed to touch the sky. Marble floors reflected light like mirrors. A grand curved staircase swept upward with such elegance it looked like something from a palace. Every corner whispered wealth. Every room told the story of a man who had conquered the world. Daniel had it all. Power, influence, respect. And beside him stood Vanessa Reed, his wife of 8 years. She was stunning, always perfectly dressed, always camera ready. Together, they looked like royalty. Their life seemed untouchable, unshakable, forever secure. But one night, everything shattered. The rain came down hard that evening. The kind of rain that makes the road disappear beneath a curtain of water. Daniel was returning from a late business meeting, his mind still running through contracts and deals. The road was slick. Visibility was poor. He didn't see the curve coming fast enough. The car spun. Metal screamed. Glass exploded. The world turned upside down in a violent blur of sound and pain. Then silence. When Daniel finally opened his eyes, he wasn't in his car anymore. He was lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by white walls and the steady beep of machines. His body felt strange, disconnected, like it no longer belonged to him. He tried to move his legs. Nothing. He tried again, harder this time, willing his body to respond. Still nothing. Panic crept into his chest. His breathing quickened. A doctor appeared beside him, her face kind but heavy with something Daniel couldn't yet name. She looked at him with the expression people wear when they're about to deliver news that will change everything. "Mr. Reed," she said gently, "you survived the crash, but your spine was severely damaged." Daniel stared at her, his throat tight. "You're paralyzed from the waist down." The words hung in the air like a sentence with no appeal. Daniel blinked, trying to process what she had just said. Paralyzed? From the waist down? Permanently. In that moment, his billions meant nothing. All the properties he owned, all the deals he had closed, all the power he had built, none of it could give him back what he had lost. His legs wouldn't move. His body had betrayed him. And suddenly, the life he had known was over. At first, Vanessa was there. She cried loudly when the doctors told her. She held his hand in the hospital and whispered through tears that everything would be okay. She posted pictures online asking for prayers, her face perfectly made up even in grief. She played the role of the devoted wife. But as days turned into weeks, something began to change. The tears stopped. The visits became shorter. Vanessa started going out again, attending events, posting glamorous photos as if nothing had happened. She laughed with friends at exclusive parties. She wore dresses that cost more than most people's rent. She moved through the world like she was still living her old life. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in a wheelchair, staring at walls that once symbolized his success but now felt like a prison. He noticed the distance growing between them. Vanessa no longer looked him in the eye. She avoided his room. When she did speak to him, her voice was clipped, impatient, cold. The warmth he once knew had disappeared completely. One evening, Daniel called out to her as she walked past his door, dressed for another night out. "Vanessa, please, stay with me tonight." She stopped but didn't turn around. "I need you," he said quietly. She let out a sharp breath and finally looked at him. Her eyes were hard, empty of the love he once saw there. "I have a life to live, Daniel," she said coldly. "I didn't sign up to be a nurse." Her words cut deeper than any physical pain he had felt. "Please," he tried again, his voice breaking. "I'm your husband." Vanessa's expression didn't soften. If anything, it grew colder. "Then hire someone to take care of you," she snapped. "Or I'm filing for divorce." She walked out without looking back. Daniel sat alone in the silence that followed, his heart heavy with a pain no doctor could treat. His body was broken, but now his marriage was too. The woman he had loved, the woman he had built a life with, was gone. And in her place was a stranger who saw him as a burden. He had no choice. A job advertisement was posted. The position was simple: a live-in caregiver. Someone to cook, clean, and assist with daily tasks. Someone to fill the role Vanessa refused to play. That was how everything changed. That was how she walked into his life. If you want to know who answered that call and what happened next, keep watching. Because this is just the beginning of a story that will challenge everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and second chances. Don't go anywhere. In the beginning, Vanessa Reed was the picture of devotion. When news of Daniel's accident spread, she rushed to the hospital with tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. Cameras flashed as she entered, and she played her part beautifully. She sat beside his bed, holding his hand, whispering words of comfort, while journalists captured every moment. "We'll get through this together," she told him, her voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. "I'm not going anywhere." The world watched and called her a loyal wife. Friends praised her strength. Social media flooded with comments about true love and commitment. Vanessa basked in the attention, her posts carefully crafted to show a woman standing by her man through his darkest hour. But once the cameras stopped rolling and the wheelchair entered their mansion, everything changed. The moment Daniel was brought home, reality set in for Vanessa. This wasn't a temporary situation. This wasn't something that would go away after a few weeks of physical therapy. Her husband, the powerful, commanding man she had married, was now dependent on others for the most basic needs. The mansion that once felt like a palace began to feel like a cage. Vanessa hated the silence. She hated the sound of wheelchair wheels on marble floors. She hated the hospital equipment that now cluttered their beautiful home. She hated the nurses who came and went, disrupting her routine. Most of all, she hated the constant reminders of Daniel's weakness. This wasn't the life she had signed up for. Within weeks, her mask began to crack. The affection she had shown in public disappeared behind closed doors. She stopped sitting with Daniel during meals. She stopped asking how he felt. She stopped pretending to care. Instead, Vanessa returned to her old life, or at least she tried to. She began dressing extravagantly again, in tight designer dresses and expensive jewelry that sparkled under the chandelier lights. She spent hours getting ready, not for Daniel, but for nights out with friends he had never met. She stayed out late, laughing loudly on her phone in the hallway, her voice echoing through the empty house. Daniel would hear her come home at 2, sometimes 3 in the morning, her heels clicking on the marble as she walked past his room without even glancing inside. When Daniel called out to her, she ignored him. When he needed something, she acted annoyed. Her words became weapons, sharp and cruel, designed to cut where it hurt most. One afternoon, Daniel struggled to reach a glass of water on the table beside him. His hand knocked it over, spilling water across the floor. Vanessa walked in at that exact moment, dressed for another outing, and stopped in the doorway. She looked at the mess, then at Daniel, and rolled her eyes dramatically. "Really, Daniel?" she said, her voice dripping with irritation. "You can't even hold a glass now?" "I'm sorry," Daniel said quietly, ashamed. "It was an accident." Vanessa sighed loudly, like he had just ruined her entire day. "Of course it was. Everything's an accident with you now." She turned and walked away, leaving him sitting there in his wheelchair, staring at the spilled water he couldn't clean up himself. The mocking didn't stop there. Whenever Daniel moved slowly or needed assistance, Vanessa made sure to comment. When he asked for help reaching something, she would pause whatever she was doing, let out an exaggerated breath, and make him feel like he was the biggest inconvenience in the world. "Can't you do anything by yourself?" she would mutter. Daniel tried to be patient. He tried to remind himself that she was adjusting, that this was hard for her too. But deep down, he knew the truth. Vanessa wasn't adjusting. She was resenting, and that resentment was growing into something far worse: contempt. She stopped speaking to him as a partner. She stopped asking his opinion on anything. She stopped including him in decisions about their home, their finances, their life. Instead, she addressed him the way someone speaks to a burden they're forced to carry. Their conversations, when they happened at all, were cold and transactional. "Do you need something?" she would ask flatly, standing in the doorway like she was in a hurry to leave. "I just want to talk," Daniel would say. "About what?" "About us. About what's happening." Vanessa would shake her head, already turning away. "There's nothing to talk about, Daniel. This is just how things are now." One night, everything came crashing down. Daniel had been feeling particularly low, the weight of his new reality pressing down on him harder than usual. When Vanessa came home late again, dressed in a red gown that hugged every curve, he tried one more time to reach her. "Vanessa, please," he said softly as she walked past his room. "Can we just talk? I miss you." She stopped in the hallway and turned slowly to face him. Her expression wasn't sad or sympathetic. It was cold, detached, almost bored. "Miss me?" she repeated, her tone laced with disbelief. "Daniel, look at yourself." He stared at her, confused and hurt. Vanessa stepped closer, her eyes hard as stone. "You're not a husband anymore," she said, each word deliberate and cutting. "You're not the man I married. You're just something I have to deal with." The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel felt something break inside him, something deeper than bone or muscle. It was the last piece of hope he had been holding on to, the hope that somewhere beneath her coldness, his wife still loved him. But as Vanessa turned and walked away without another word, Daniel realized the painful truth. She didn't love him anymore. Maybe she never really had. What happens when the person who promised to stand by you becomes the one who tears you down? Daniel's world has collapsed, but his story is far from over. Stay with us, because what comes next will change everything. Also like this video and subscribe to the channel. Don't miss what happens in the next. Vanessa Reed had made up her mind. If Daniel couldn't take care of himself, and if she refused to play the role of caregiver, then someone else would have to do it. But it wasn't just about getting help. It was about maintaining the image she had worked so hard to build. She couldn't have people whispering that she had abandoned her disabled husband. She couldn't let the world see cracks in the perfect life she displayed on social media. So, she came up with a solution that would satisfy everyone, or at least make her look better. "We're hiring a live-in maid," she announced one afternoon, not as a suggestion, but as a decision already made. Daniel looked up from his wheelchair, surprised. "A maid?" "Yes," Vanessa said curtly, scrolling through her phone without looking at him. "Someone to cook, clean, and handle things." By things, she meant Daniel. But she didn't say that part out loud. Within days, an advertisement was posted. The position was simple: live-in domestic help for a wealthy household. Good pay, private room, all meals provided. The responses came quickly, but Vanessa was picky. She didn't want someone too confident, too chatty, or too curious. She wanted someone quiet, obedient, and invisible. That's when Lena's application arrived. Lena was 24 years old, but life had aged her in ways that didn't show on her face. She was soft-spoken, polite, and desperate for stability. Her resume was thin: a few short-term housekeeping jobs, no formal education beyond high school, and a single line at the bottom that read, "Orphaned at age 7. Vanessa barely glanced at it before making the call. "You start Monday." When Lena arrived at the Reed mansion, she stood outside the tall iron gates for a long moment, clutching a small canvas bag that held everything she owned. She wore a faded coat over worn jeans, her hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. Her shoes were old but clean, the kind that had been resoled more than once. The gates opened slowly, as if the house itself was deciding whether to let her in. Lena took a deep breath and walked forward. The driveway stretched out before her like something from a movie. Perfectly trimmed hedges lined the path. A marble fountain stood in the center, water flowing elegantly from tier to tier. 2 luxury cars gleamed under the afternoon sun, their polished surfaces reflecting the blue sky above. Lena had never seen anything like it. She had grown up in foster homes where 5 people shared a single bathroom. She had slept on couches, floors, and once in a storage closet when there was no room left. Wealth like this was foreign to her. Not something she envied, but something she couldn't quite understand. A woman in a crisp white blouse and tailored pants appeared at the front door. "Vanessa Reed." She looked Lena up and down with the cold efficiency of someone inspecting a product. "You're the maid?" Vanessa asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Yes, ma'am," Lena replied softly. "My name is Lena." Vanessa didn't smile. "Follow me." They walked inside, and Lena's breath caught in her throat. The entrance hall was vast. A crystal chandelier hung overhead, casting light across marble floors so clean they looked like glass. A grand staircase curved upward to the second floor, its railing polished to perfection. Everything gleamed. Everything was spotless. But despite the beauty, something felt wrong. The air was heavy, cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. The house felt empty, like no one really lived there, like no one really wanted to. Vanessa led her through the main floor, pointing out rooms with little emotion. Kitchen, dining room, guest bathroom. "You'll clean all of these daily." Lena nodded, taking mental notes. "Your room is upstairs, next to the laundry. You'll start at 6 every morning. Breakfast, cleaning, errands, whatever I need." "Understood." "Yes, ma'am." Vanessa paused near a closed door at the end of the hallway. Her expression shifted just slightly into something colder. And then there's him. She pushed the door open without knocking. Inside, sitting near a large window, was a man in a wheelchair. He was facing away from them, his head lowered, his shoulders slumped forward. The room was dark, the curtains half drawn, casting shadows across the expensive furniture that now felt out of place. "This is Daniel," Vanessa said flatly, gesturing toward him like he was an object. "My husband." Lena stepped inside quietly, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. Daniel turned his head slowly, and for the first time, she saw his face. He was older than she expected, maybe in his early 40s, with a strong jaw and tired eyes. There were lines on his face that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. But what struck Lena most wasn't his appearance, it was the look in his eyes. It was the look of someone who had been broken, not just physically, but in every way that mattered. "Daniel, this is Lena," Vanessa continued, her tone completely devoid of warmth. "She'll be helping around the house." "And with you?" Daniel said nothing. He just nodded slightly, then looked away, as if ashamed to be seen. Vanessa turned back to Lena. "He can't walk. He needs help with most things. Meals, medication, moving around. You'll handle it when I'm not here." "Which is most of the time." Lena noticed the bitterness in Vanessa's voice, the way she spoke about Daniel, as if he were a burden she had been unfairly saddled with. Not as her husband, not as someone she once loved, but as the problem she had to manage. Lena said nothing. She simply nodded. "Any questions?" Vanessa asked. "No, ma'am." "Good. Start tomorrow morning. 6 sharp." Vanessa left the room without another word, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor as she walked away. The door closed softly behind her, and suddenly, Lena was alone with Daniel. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Lena stood near the doorway, unsure whether to leave or stay. Daniel remained by the window, staring out at nothing in particular. Finally, Lena broke the silence. "Is there anything you need, sir?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "No, thank you." His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. It was the voice of someone who had stopped expecting kindness. Lena studied him for a moment longer, her instinct sharp from years of reading people, learning who to trust and who to fear. And in that moment, she sensed something deeply wrong in this house. Something broken. Something hidden beneath the expensive furniture and polished floors. But she said nothing. She had learned long ago that survival meant observation, not judgment. So she simply nodded and quietly left the room. Lena has entered a world of wealth and silence. But what she doesn't know yet is that her presence will change everything. What happens when someone who has nothing meets someone who has lost everything? Like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned because this story is just beginning. Lena had been working in the Reed mansion for nearly 3 weeks when she realized something disturbing. Vanessa's cruelty wasn't just private anymore. It was becoming a performance. And Lena was the audience. At first, Lena thought she was imagining it. The way Vanessa would wait until Lena entered a room before snapping at Daniel. The way her insults became louder, sharper, more deliberate when someone else was watching. It was as if Vanessa needed a witness to her power, someone to confirm that she was in control and Daniel was not. Lena tried to stay invisible, to blend into the background like she had learned to do in every other difficult situation in her life. But Vanessa wouldn't let her. One morning, Vanessa called Daniel into the living room while Lena was dusting the shelves nearby. Daniel wheeled himself in slowly, his expression already guarded, bracing for whatever was coming. "I'm going to Monaco next week," Vanessa announced, scrolling through her phone without looking at him. "Marcus has a yacht there. I'll be gone for 10 days. Daniel said nothing at first. Then, quietly, he asked, "Marcus?" Vanessa finally looked up, a cold smile playing at her lips. "A friend. You would know him. He's actually capable of having fun." The insult hung in the air. Lena kept her eyes on the shelf, her hands working mechanically, but every muscle in her body was tense. "Vanessa, please," Daniel said softly. "Can we not do this?" "Do what?" Vanessa's voice was laced with mock innocence. "I'm just telling you my plans. Or do I need your permission now?" She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Oh wait, that's right. You can't exactly stop me, can you?" Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He had learned that arguing with Vanessa only made things worse. Vanessa stood and walked past him, deliberately brushing against his wheelchair as she left. "Lena," she called over her shoulder, "make sure he eats something. I can't have him dying before the lawyers finalize everything." Lena's hand froze mid-motion. The words were said casually, almost as a joke, but there was something beneath them, something dark and calculated. The cruelty escalated from there. Vanessa seemed to feed off Daniel's helplessness, and now that Lena was present, she had someone to witness her dominance. She would ask Daniel questions in front of Lena, then mock his answers. She would accidentally knock things off tables near his wheelchair, then sigh loudly about how much extra work he created. But the worst day came on a humid Thursday afternoon. Lena was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard raised voices coming from the hallway. She quickly wiped her hands and grabbed the tray of food she had prepared for Daniel, heading toward his room. As she approached, the voices grew louder. "I don't care what you think," Vanessa was shouting. "This is my house now. You're just taking up space." "It's our house, Vanessa," Daniel replied, his voice strained but firm. "We built this together." "You built it." Vanessa's laugh was cruel and sharp. "You? Look at you. You can't even stand up. You can't do anything. You're not the man I married. You're just broken." Lena rounded the corner just as Vanessa reached for something near the doorway, a metal bucket filled with dirty mop water that one of the cleaning staff had left there earlier. Time seemed to slow down. Vanessa grabbed the bucket with both hands, her face twisted with rage and something worse, satisfaction. She lifted it high. "Vanessa, don't," Daniel started, but she didn't stop. She tipped the bucket forward and dirty, gray water cascaded down over Daniel's head. It soaked through his white shirt. It ran down his face, dripping from his chin. It pooled in his lap and on the floor around his wheelchair. The smell of cleaning solution and grime filled the air. Daniel sat frozen, his eyes closed, water dripping from his hair. His hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair so tightly his knuckles turned white. But he didn't move. He didn't speak. He just sat there, drenched and powerless. Lena stood in the doorway, the tray trembling in her hands. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. All she could do was stare in horror at the scene unfolding before her. Vanessa set the bucket down with a loud clang and stepped back, her chest heaving. But instead of remorse or shock at what she had just done, she smirked. "There," she said coldly. "Now you match how you make me feel. Dirty, used up, worthless." She looked at Daniel sitting there, soaked and humiliated, and her voice dropped to something even crueler. "You're useless, Daniel. A broken investment. I should have left you the day the doctors told me you'd never walk again." Daniel's eyes slowly opened. He didn't look at Vanessa. He stared straight ahead, his face a mask of pain and shame. Vanessa turned and noticed Lena standing frozen in the doorway. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and instead of guilt or embarrassment, Vanessa's expression was defiant, almost challenging. "What are you staring at?" Vanessa snapped. Clean this up. Then she walked past Lena without another word, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she disappeared down the hallway. Lena stood there for what felt like an eternity, the tray still shaking in her hands. Finally, she set it down carefully on a nearby table and moved toward Daniel. "Mr. Reed," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm fine," Daniel said quietly, though he clearly wasn't. "Let me help you," Lena said, grabbing towels from the bathroom. She worked quickly and gently, drying his face and hair, helping him out of his soaked shirt. She didn't say anything. There were no words that could make this better. She just moved with quiet efficiency, treating him with the dignity Vanessa had tried to strip away. When she finally helped him into a clean shirt, Daniel spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Lena." She nodded, unable to trust her voice. That moment changed everything for Lena. She had seen cruelty before, in foster homes, in temporary placements where she was treated like a burden. She had learned to survive it, to endure it, to keep her head down and wait for it to pass. But this was different. This wasn't just cruelty. This was evil, calculated, deliberate, performed for an audience. And as Lena cleaned up the dirty water from the floor, her hands still trembling, she made a silent vow. She would not stay silent. Not anymore. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, she would find a way to help Daniel escape this nightmare. Because no one, no matter how broken their body, deserved to be treated like this. Humiliation can break a person, but sometimes it awakens something in those who witness it. Lena saw the worst of humanity that day, and it changed her forever. What happens when the quiet observer decides to become the protector? Stay with us because this story is far from over. Also subscribe to the channel. Lena had been working in the Reed mansion for 3 weeks when she realized something important. Daniel Reed wasn't broken. He was buried under shame, under loneliness, under the weight of a wife who treated him like furniture and a body that no longer obeyed his commands. But beneath all of that, there was still a man who deserved to be seen. So Lena made a choice. She would treat him with dignity, not pity, not sympathy, just simple, quiet respect. Every morning, she entered his room with a soft knock and a gentle greeting. "Good morning, Mr. Reed." She never barged in. She never acted like he was invisible. She looked him in the eyes when she spoke, something Vanessa had stopped doing months ago. When she helped him with meals, she didn't rush. She didn't sigh or glance at her phone. She simply sat nearby, ready if he needed her, but never hovering. She prepared food the way he liked it, asked if he wanted more water, and cleaned up quietly without making him feel like a burden. When she helped him dress, she moved with care and professionalism. No awkward glances, no uncomfortable silence, just efficiency paired with kindness. She handed him his shirt and waited patiently as he tried to button it himself. When his fingers struggled, she stepped in without a word, finished the task, and moved on as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Daniel noticed, for the first time since the accident, someone was treating him like a human being, not a patient, not a problem, not something to manage or endure, just a person. At first, he didn't know how to respond. He had grown so used to Vanessa's coldness, to being ignored and dismissed, that simple kindness felt foreign. But slowly, something inside him began to shift. The walls he had built around himself, walls of shame and defeat, started to crack. One morning, as Lena set his breakfast on the table, Daniel spoke. "Thank you, Lena." She looked at him, surprised. It was the first time he had said her name. "You're welcome, Mr. Reed," she replied softly, a small smile crossing her face. From that moment on, something unspoken passed between them. Not friendship, not yet, but an understanding. A quiet alliance formed in a house filled with coldness and lies. Behind his silence, Daniel was observing everything. People assumed that because his body was broken, his mind must be weak. Vanessa certainly thought so. She had stopped hiding her contempt, her late nights, her phone calls with men whose voices Daniel didn't recognize. She moved through the house like he wasn't there, like he couldn't see or hear or understand what was happening around him. But Daniel was sharper than anyone realized. One night, while Vanessa was out, Daniel made a call to an old business associate, someone discreet, someone who owed him a favor. Within days, tiny cameras were installed throughout the mansion. In the living room, in the hallway, in Vanessa's bedroom, invisible to the untrained eye, but recording everything. Daniel watched the footage on a tablet he kept hidden in his room, and what he saw confirmed every suspicion he had been too afraid to name. Vanessa wasn't just distant. She was planning something. He watched her bring men into their home. He watched her laugh and drink wine in the same rooms where she had once promised to love him forever. He watched her ignore his calls for help, mock him behind closed doors, and treat Lena with the same cruelty she showed him. But it was the conversations he recorded that chilled him most. Late one evening, Daniel played back audio from Vanessa's bedroom. She was on the phone, her voice low but clear. "I'm not waiting forever, Marcus," she said. "The lawyers say if anything happens to him, everything goes to me. The house, the accounts, all of it." There was a pause. Then she laughed, a cold, calculated sound. "No, he's not getting better. If anything, he's getting worse. And honestly, I don't know how much longer I can do this." Another pause. "What do you mean, how?" "His medication, obviously. A little more of this, a little less of that. The doctors won't question it. He's already weak." Daniel's hands tightened on the armrests of his wheelchair. His heart pounded in his chest. She wasn't just abandoning him. She was planning to kill him. He saved the recording, backed it up, but he said nothing. Not yet. He needed more proof, more evidence, and he needed to be smart about how he used it. Meanwhile, Lena had been noticing things too. She didn't have cameras or recordings, but she had eyes and ears, and she had spent enough time in difficult situations to recognize danger when she saw it. One night, as she was cleaning the hallway outside Vanessa's room, she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. Vanessa was on the phone again, pacing back and forth. "The inheritance timeline is clear," she said. "Once he's gone, there's no contest. Everything transfers immediately." Lena froze, her hands still gripping the handle of the vacuum cleaner. "I just need to be patient a little longer," Vanessa continued. "His health is already declining. A few adjustments to his medication schedule, and nature will take its course." Lena's stomach twisted. She had suspected Vanessa was cruel, but this was something else entirely. This was murder. She quietly turned off the vacuum and stepped back, her mind racing. What was she supposed to do? If she went to the police, would they even believe her? She was just a maid. Vanessa was a wealthy, well-connected woman. Who would take her word over Vanessa's? And if Vanessa found out she had been listening, Lena's life could be in danger too. For 2 days, Lena wrestled with the decision. Stay silent and survive. Keep her head down, do her job, and pretend she hadn't heard anything. That was the safe choice, the smart choice. But every time she looked at Daniel, sitting alone in his wheelchair, trusting the people around him to care for him, she couldn't ignore what she knew. On the 3rd day, Lena made her choice. She knocked on Daniel's door and stepped inside. He looked up, surprised to see the serious expression on her face. "Mr. Reed," she said quietly, closing the door behind her. "We need to talk." Daniel straightened in his chair, sensing the weight in her voice. "What is it?" Lena took a deep breath. "I think your wife is trying to kill you." The truth is finally spoken. 2 people who barely know each other are about to become each other's only hope. But when you're up against wealth, power, and a ruthless plan, can the truth really set you free? Stay with us, because the storm is just beginning. The moment Lena spoke those words, "I think your wife is trying to kill you," the air in the room changed. Daniel's face remained calm, but his eyes darkened with a mixture of anger and vindication. He wasn't surprised. He was confirmed. "I know," he said quietly. Lena blinked, caught off guard. "You know." Daniel nodded slowly. "I've been watching, listening, recording." He gestured toward his tablet on the side table. "I have cameras installed throughout the house. Audio recordings. Footage of her with other men. Conversations about inheritance. About medication adjustments." Lena's eyes widened. "Then why haven't you?" "Because I needed more," Daniel interrupted. "I needed undeniable proof. And I needed to be sure she wouldn't find out before I was ready." He looked at Lena with something close to gratitude. "But now I have a witness. Someone who heard it firsthand. Someone she doesn't know is watching. Lena sat down slowly, her mind racing. What are you going to do? Daniel's jaw tightened. I'm going to let her think she's winning, and then I'm going to take everything from her. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel and Lena became silent allies in a dangerous game. To the outside world, nothing changed. Lena continued her duties, cooking, cleaning, helping Daniel with his daily needs. Vanessa continued her charade, going out at night, flaunting her freedom, treating Daniel like he was already gone. But behind the scenes, Daniel was building his case. He contacted his most trusted lawyer, a sharp, ruthless woman named Margaret Chun who had helped him navigate complex real estate deals for years. When Daniel showed her the evidence, her expression remained professional, but her eyes gleamed with the thrill of a battle about to begin. This is airtight, Margaret said, scrolling through the recordings on her tablet. Conspiracy. Attempted murder. Fraud. She'll go to prison. I want more than that, Daniel said coldly. I want her exposed. Publicly. Completely. Margaret nodded. Then we do this properly. We alert the authorities, but we time it perfectly. Let her make one more move. One more mistake. And we make sure there's no way out. Daniel agreed. Security was quietly upgraded. Discreet surveillance teams were hired. The police were informed but asked to wait for Daniel's signal. Every piece was moved carefully into place. Vanessa suspected nothing. In fact, she grew more careless, more arrogant. She believed Daniel was too weak, too defeated, too dependent to ever fight back. She stopped hiding her phone calls. She stopped lowering her voice. She acted like a woman who had already won. One afternoon, she stood in the kitchen while Lena prepared lunch, loudly discussing her plans with someone on the phone. Another month, maybe 2, Vanessa said casually, examining her manicured nails. He's declining fast. The doctors say it's natural, given his condition. She laughed. No one will question anything. Lena kept her head down, chopping vegetables with steady hands. Inside, her heart pounded, but she said nothing. She had learned to wear a mask, just like Vanessa. Finally, the day came. Daniel chose the living room. The same room where Vanessa had humiliated him countless times. The same room where she had mocked his weakness, dismissed his pain, and paraded her lovers. Now, it would become the stage for his reckoning. Margaret arrived first, along with 2 private security guards dressed in plain clothes. The police were on standby, parked just outside the gates, waiting for Daniel's call. Lena was instructed to summon Vanessa. Mrs. Reed, she said nervously, finding Vanessa in her bedroom, applying lipstick for another night out. Mr. Reed asked if you could come to the living room. He says it's important. Vanessa sighed dramatically, clearly annoyed. Now, I'm about to leave. He said it's urgent. Lena pressed. Vanessa rolled her eyes, but stood, smoothing down her tight red dress. Fine. This better be quick. She walked confidently down the grand staircase, her heels clicking against the marble. When she entered the living room, she expected to find Daniel alone, perhaps begging for her attention again, pleading for her to stay. Instead, she found him positioned in the center of the room, flanked by Margaret Chun and 2 unfamiliar men in dark suits. A large screen had been set up against the wall. Lena stood quietly near the doorway. Vanessa stopped, confusion flickering across her face. What is this? Daniel looked at her calmly, his voice steady and cold. I know everything, Vanessa. Her confident expression faltered for just a second. What are you talking about? I know about Marcus. About the others. About the nights you've spent in our bed with men who aren't your husband. Daniel's voice remained unervingly calm. I know about the money you've been moving into private accounts. And I know about your plan to kill me. Vanessa's face went pale. That's insane. You're delusional. Am I? Daniel nodded to Margaret, who pressed a button on a remote. The screen lit up. Video footage began to play. Vanessa with another man, laughing in the bedroom. Audio recordings of her phone conversations, discussing inheritance timelines and medication adjustments. Timestamps. Dates. Everything. Vanessa's mouth opened, but no words came out. She stood frozen, her face cycling through shock, fear, and then desperate anger. You recorded me? She hissed. That's illegal. You can't. Actually, Margaret interrupted smoothly, In this state, one-party consent laws apply. Everything here is perfectly admissible in court. Vanessa's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. Then her gaze landed on Lena. You. Vanessa spat, her voice venomous. You told him, didn't you? You little. She lunged toward Lena, her face twisted with rage. But before she could take 2 steps, the security guards moved swiftly, blocking her path and restraining her arms. Let me go, Vanessa screamed, struggling against their grip. You have no right. Daniel raised his hand calmly, and Margaret made a quick call. Moments later, the front doors opened. 2 police officers walked in, badges visible, expressions professional and serious. Vanessa Reed, one of them said, approaching with handcuffs, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and attempted poisoning. You have the right to remain silent." Vanessa's screams echoed through the mansion as the officers cuffed her wrists. She twisted and shouted, hurling threats and insults, but no one moved to help her. The woman who had once ruled this house with cold arrogance was now being dragged out in disgrace. Daniel watched silently as she was led away, his face unreadable. But in his eyes, there was something that hadn't been there in months. Justice. The trap has closed. The truth has been revealed. But what happens next? Can Daniel rebuild his life after everything he's lost? And what about Lena, the quiet maid who risked everything to do what was right? Stay with us, because this story isn't over yet. The police officers held Vanessa firmly as she thrashed in their grip, her voice shrill and desperate. Her perfectly styled hair had come loose. Her red dress, meant to symbolize confidence and control, now looked like a costume from a failed performance. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, her eyes wild as they darted between Daniel, the lawyers, and the officers. "This is my house, my money. You think you could just take everything from me?" Daniel remained silent in his wheelchair, watching her with an expression that gave nothing away. No anger, no satisfaction, just calm, measured observation. Vanessa's rage turned into something uglier, desperation mixed with venom. "You're pathetic, Daniel. You were always pathetic. You think this changes anything? You're still a cripple. You're still nothing without me." The room went cold. Even the police officers stiffened at her words. Margaret stepped forward, her voice sharp and professional. "Mrs. Reed, I strongly suggest you stop talking." But Vanessa wasn't listening. She was unraveling, years of cruelty and arrogance pouring out in a torrent of ugly truth. "I gave you the best years of my life. I stood by you when you were on top. And what did you become? A burden." Vanessa. Daniel's voice cut through her tirade like a blade. Quiet but commanding. The same voice that once controlled boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals. Everyone turned to look at him. And then, slowly, impossibly, Daniel placed his hands on the armrests of his wheelchair. Lena's breath caught. Margaret's eyes widened. Even the police officers paused. Daniel shifted his weight forward. His jaw tightened. His arms trembled with effort. And then, inch by inch, he pushed himself upward. His legs shook. His balance wavered. But he didn't stop. And then he stood, unsteady, leaning slightly to one side, but upright, on his own 2 feet. The room erupted in shocked silence. Vanessa's face went white. Her mouth fell open. For the first time since this nightmare began, she had no words. You can walk?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Daniel took one careful step forward, then another. His movements were slow, deliberate, still recovering from months of intensive physical therapy he had been doing in secret. Therapy Vanessa never knew about because she had stopped caring enough to ask. "I've been working with specialists for the past 2 months, Daniel said calmly, his voice steady despite the physical strain. "The doctor said there was a chance, small but real, that with the right treatment, I might regain some function. So I tried. Every day. In private. While you were out celebrating what you thought would be my death." Vanessa staggered backward, restrained by the officers but visibly shaken. Her entire plan, her entire narrative was collapsing in real time. She had underestimated him. Completely. "You let me think," she started, her voice cracking. You let me believe you were helpless. I was helpless, Daniel replied. For a long time. But not anymore. He took another step, stronger this time, and met her eyes with a gaze that held no pity, no anger, only quiet, unshakable resolve. You tried to destroy me, Vanessa. You mocked me, abandoned me, planned to murder me, but you forgot something important. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I didn't build an empire by being weak. I built it by being smart, by being patient, by knowing when to strike. Vanessa's knees buckled slightly. The officers held her upright as tears, real ones this time, began streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone realizing they had lost everything. Get her out of here, Margaret said quietly to the officers. As Vanessa was led away, still sobbing and shouting incoherently, Daniel finally allowed himself to sit back down in his wheelchair. His legs were exhausted, his body screaming from the effort. But he had done what he needed to do. He had stood, not just physically, but in every way that mattered. In the days that followed, Vanessa's arrest made headlines. The media frenzy was immediate and brutal. The glamorous socialite, the devoted wife, exposed as a calculating attempted murderer. Her lawyers tried to spin the story, but the evidence was overwhelming. Within weeks, she was convicted. Her assets were frozen. Her reputation destroyed. Her freedom taken. She lost everything. The marriage, the wealth, the life she had tried so desperately to preserve. Daniel didn't chase revenge beyond that. He didn't need to. Justice had been served. And more importantly, he had reclaimed something far more valuable than money or property. He had reclaimed his dignity. As for Lena, there was no fairy tale ending. No sudden romance. No dramatic declaration of love. That would have been unrealistic, inappropriate, and unfair to both of them. But Daniel did something better. He gave her safety, respect, and a future. He offered her a permanent position, not as a maid, but as his personal assistant. A real salary, benefits, a path forward. He helped her enroll in online courses so she could finish her education. He treated her not as someone beneath him, but as someone who had stood beside him when no one else would. You saved my life, Daniel told her one quiet afternoon as they sat in the library, sunlight streaming through the windows. Lena shook her head. You saved yourself, Mr. Reed. I just told the truth. Daniel smiled. Sometimes that's the bravest thing a person can do. The mansion, once filled with cruelty and coldness, began to change. The echoes of Vanessa's laughter and mocking words faded. In their place came something quieter, more genuine. Conversations, shared meals, moments of mutual respect. Daniel continued his physical therapy. Some days were better than others. He would never move the way he once did. But he could walk. He could stand. And that was enough. Karma, it turned out, didn't arrive loudly. It didn't come with thunder or lightning or dramatic confrontation. It arrived prepared, patient, methodical. And when it finally stood up, it stood tall. This is how justice wins. Not with rage, but with resilience. Not with revenge, but with reclaiming what was stolen. Daniel stood when the world thought he couldn't. Lena spoke when silence was safer. And Vanessa fell when she thought she was untouchable. If this story moved you, share it. Because sometimes the quiet ones are the strongest. And karma? Karma always knows when to stand up.